Welcome to Psychological Interventions to Improve Mental Health Among Persons with Deafblindness. I'd like to introduce Priya Gupta. Priya trained as a psychologist and expertise in the field of mental health, counseling, behavioral science, and research. She is working full-time at Sense International India on a mental health project. She has done her master's in psychology and diploma in guidance and counseling. The past 2 years, she's been working with children and young adults with deafblindness and multiple disabilities and their families on mental health across the regions of India. So please welcome Priya Gupta.
Thank you. Okay. Before I start, I actually prepared a brief introduction for myself as well. That how will I introduce myself? So I'm Priya from India, 27-year-old, brown girl with the black hair, wearing a sari. So it's an Indian outfit, so that just representing my country. And please bear with my throat. It's little harsh. I think I had too much fun yesterday. And I know, my sense of humor is great. You will get to know in 40 minutes. So what I will do before I start my presentation, I will go slow so that in the room everybody gets time to absorb. And wherever you find during the presentation that, something did not come out or you need more clarification, please do so. Please ask as many questions as you can, because I think that will give me a sense of perspective from my presentation, right? Okay, so to start, I have a question for you to all. This is about me, which she already explained, where I come from, where I work. So overview, so what is going to come in the presentation. So before even starting about the intervention that we worked on in India, I would want to give you an overview what we have been doing in last 2 years. So before I start, I have a question for you all, and I'm going to read out loud. If you have ever been to a psychologist or a therapy or a counseling for any personal or professional reason, can you please raise your hands? Great, there are a great number of hands. So as you see that you're raising hands, that you have accessibility to reach out to a psychologist or go to a therapy, it's great. But when we look back, looking back to India, when we look at the resources as well, they're limited. Because I keep another question, that people who have you ever felt the need of psychologist, but not been able to reach out to? Is there anybody? Raise hands. Nobody, right? Because I see a lot of raising hands already. So why I put up this question? Because when we did a survey in India, a lot of time when we look at mental health, it has been attached with the stigma. A stigma which mental health directly related to mental illness. But it is not, right? Am I getting it right? No. There's so much more to it, isn't it? So what we started actually 2 years back down when we were in COVID. So actually COVID bring out the need of mental health. It was always there. It always existed, right? But maybe under the carpet. So during COVID, we realized that there's so much more we need to deal about mental health. So when we look at person with disability, and specifically when we are talking about people with deafblindness and multiple disability, right? So there's a lot more when disability take the forefront on the driving seat, and the mental health and other aspect of health take the back seat. It was during COVID when we get to know there was so much going on, which is all about present in my during the next 30 minutes. Am I going okay, or do I need to slow down? Please tell me. Thank you. Okay, so before we move forward, just wanted to introduce, we all know what deafblindness is. But we know there are two types of deafblindness, which majorly compartmentalize. One, congenital deafblindness, where the disability is there by birth. And the second is the acquired deafblindness, where the disability comes as we grow old, with the age, or due to incident, right? So moving forward, talking about deafblindness and then how mental health was related. We know a lot of us, when we go through, we talk about mental health. We look at health as a broader term, and it becomes easier. For example, if I had a cut on my hand, I know I need to do something about it, right? It's bleeding. If I get a cut on my hand, what will happen? I will go to the doctor, right? To get the right kind of medication to heal that. If it doesn't get healed, what will happen? If I don't go to the doctor, I don't do anything on the cut, what will happen? It get infected. I might die with the infection. So a lot of time, it is easier to look at what is visible when we talk about the physical health. But in the terms of when we talk about mental health, a lot of time it is not visible directly. So when we were looking at the aspect, like if I'm feeling I have a mental health issue, I might vocalize it, I might verbalize it, and sometimes I might not know. I'm feeling something, but I do not have words. So imagine when we are working with people with deafblindness and multiple disability, where they might not know what is happening, or even if they know, they might not know how to vocalize it. So when we looked down and when we were starting it, talking about the mental health, we realized there was no adapted tool specifically talking and identifying that mental health issues which existed. There was a self-rating questionnaire WHO has introduced, World Health Organization, that is self-rating. There are 5 statements and you rate yourself. And when we know that there is an adaptation we need to do for our people with deafblindness, there was nothing we could come up. There was a lot of searching that was going around, and we realized that we need to create something to understand what exists, to actually screen and identify those mental health issues. Existed, but might not have been vocalized. So we went around, we did the research. When we look at in the terms of research aspect, documentation, there was dearth of data. We could not find. So what we did, with a lot of collaboration and learning how it could be introduced, we created a screening checklist. So what we did, there was a screening checklist named specifically for children and young adults. So I would want to mention this. When I'm presenting this work has been specially come across from Grand Challenges Canada. They specifically work on mental health. We propose them that, the work has not been done on mental health, or especially looking out to the mental health issues among children and young adults. So they look out, they've been asked to work upon a specific population, which was 10 to 24 years old. So we get to work with that specific population. And the first part was to identify and screen, to understand what exactly is the mental health issues are there across. Because we could not find much of data, what all are there and what could all possible issues are there. So we worked on this checklist, which are based on 5 dimensions. We all know there's so much more when we talk about mental health, such a wide area. We had to narrow it down to those 5 dimensions. So when we look at those 5 dimensions, The first was behavioral, to understand the issues based on the behavioral aspect. The second was emotional. So we know a lot of time there are emotions which have been portrayed and visualized based on the mental health issues that we once is facing. So looking at the emotional aspect, social aspect. So we know there are so many terminologies come around and issues which we face based on the social aspect that we have. Then we talk about the substance use. So we know there could be a mental health issues one person is facing. And being said that, one of the aspects which we have to look upon was very important of substance use. We know there is a very fine line about using and then when it becomes substance abuse, right? Then we are talking about cognitive and physiological regulation, the fifth dimension. A lot more that comes around when we work with people with deaf blindness is one of the very important is their cognitive functioning, and based on that, the impairment also affecting their mental health. So these were the 5 dimensions. Based on these 5 dimensions, we built on a screening checklist, which was again rating based, and there were 2 screening checklists. First was for children 10 to 18 years old, and second was for the young adult 19 to 24-year-old. We know that there are few changes and the aspect that we need to look upon which are different in children and different in young adult. So we created 2 checklists based on these 5 dimensions, which has around 37 questions to identify and screen and look out what are the mental health issues we could identify and then work upon them. Provide the intervention, create the intervention which can be adapted from the existing aspect. So from these 5 dimensions, what we did in the screening checklist, we divided them into the ranges. Like we have for IQ to understand mild, moderate, severe, profound. Similarly, to identify the mental health issue the person is facing, we classified them into those categories so that we could able to understand where and how we can work upon. Also, we classify them on the dimensions, which dimension need more attention. Then when we look around that how the screening checklist was helping us to identify those issues. For example, a behavioral issue which was not there 3 years ago before the COVID and suddenly appearing in the child or the young adult, which the special educator might not have an answer for, or the parent is clueless about. And there could be a reason the child or the young adult is facing. There could be mental health issues which the child or young adult is not able to communicate. So we were trying to classify those, understand those issues, and build on an intervention for all of them, which we could work. So I would want to specify one more thing which was very important here. How did we identify those screening checklists? So with the help of special educator and the caregiver, we filled those checklists, because a lot of time the child might not able to communicate what we are referring or asking. We know the caregiver is there 24/7 with the child and the young adult, and special educator who work with them. So they too helped out for us to understand, identify, and screen those mental health issues. So this is one of the picture which I would like to describe as well. So what photograph is showing? On the right, there is a special educator holding the screening checklist, which contain questions. On the left, the caregiver, the mother, with the child sitting around, and they're asking the questions. There are questions related to ideal activities. There were questions related to the behavioral aspect. There were questions related to the change in emotional aspect. There were questions related to understanding why, if the child is crying, crying for what reason? Crying for food, or child is crying to crave attention. There were questions related to the social aspect. There were questions related to talking about how do they feel about having or not having a social group. There were questions related to talk about future. So there were aspects which was, I'm so sorry. Yeah, you see my excitement? Just to clear, am I okay with my accent and the speed? Thank you. Please let me know when I need to slow down. Sometimes my excitement takes over with my sound. Thank you. Let's see if that works. Thank you. Something we learn in the morning, life. Okay, so when we look at the checklist, as I mentioned, there were 37 questions around it. And not just those 37 questions, we wanted to collect a lot of demographic data as well to understand if the person is facing any challenges, mental health issues related to the demographic, socioeconomic aspect as well. So what we collected data from around 978 children and young adults who were enrolled across the partner organization. So when I say that I work in Sense India, that is in India, we work on a partner organization level. So we have organization across India where we have direct communication with them, and the children and young adults and people with deaf, blindness, and multiple disability are enrolled there, studying, working. So when we look at, because we had a very specific population, 10 to 24, we collected data, which was across, as I mentioned, 978. And from there, what we did, we actually put them to understand how many were there from congenital deafblindness and how many were there from acquired deafblindness. Why it was so important? To understand that there might be a cause. When we look at acquired deafblindness, there could be aspect where the person is not able to accept the deafness or blindness, which is acquired, right? So there could be aspect which they might be facing through that. So to understand all the nitty-gritties, to understand all the specific aspect that we could collect, we build on. So this table is actually talking about, as I mentioned, that what exactly the characteristics we took from the participants. So there were gender that we looked out, male and female, how many were there. Then we looked at the location, that how many people are from the urban area of India, how many people are there from the rural area. Then you look at the status of siblings. So why it was important? We were actually trying to understand that having a sibling or not having a sibling has an impact on their mental health or not. The aspect of it. Because a lot of time when we look at the support system, right? And one of the support system could be having a sibling, or what the results were amazing, and I will share the example with you as well. Moving forward, psychiatric diagnosis. We also wanted to understand that what their psychiatric diagnosis happened before when we reach out to them. Like, have they been to visited a psychiatrist or psychologist or neurologist? So that we could understand how many had access or resources beforehand. So when we look at the result, it was quite amazing. There was one aspect that I was talking about, sibling. Having a sibling, there were few examples which come around, that there was a feeling of neglect as well. There was a feeling where a sibling was mentioning. So when we are talking about the case study, we also went into a depth interview. Sibling did not know how to interact with the brother or the sister, or how to actually look out. Whereas when we looked at the children and young adult, they also mentioned that there are so many things my brother is doing, I'm not able to do. The feeling of neglect, the hope that he or she is able to do, but I'm not. That comparison also take a lot of toll in them. The self-esteem was one of the aspects that affected their mental health deeply. It lowers their confidence in terms of how they look upon themselves and to the others. So there are a bunch of specific tables that I presented here. So when we look at, again, the number of males and females, where we collected the data of children and young adult, and where do they fall in. So when you look at it in the severe category, there were males, 8 males who were identified in the severe category. A lot of time, there was stigma as well around gender, as we know. So when we're looking at the mental health issues and upon the ranges, there were aspects when we look at even in the young adults, there were 6 who scored severe. Moving forward, when we look at around the category where we understand the urban and rural population. So who faces the more mental health issues? People who are living in a rural area, or people who are grown up in an urban area. And again, when we look at, you'll be looking at the people, from above moderate, there were urban area, that people who have been born in urban area also faces a lot of mental health issues. We might have that presumption that people who might not have many resources might face more mental health issues. But that was not the case here when we looked at the data. Moving forward, so here is the frequency distribution of having a sibling and not having a sibling for children and young adult. Then again, divided into the range. Where do they fall in? And as I told you, that there were so many cases we come around, that people who have siblings also face many mental health issues, because not knowing was one of the questions that has been raised. Moving forward, there is again looking at the score which they where they scored on the dimension. So as I talked about the 5 dimensions, we also looked around that which is the most scored dimension where the child or the young adult faces the mental health issues. So one of the aspects which you look at is cognitive and physiological regulation, where the child in the male category is 12.20 standard. It is the average score to understand for us where they are falling and what are the percentage that to understand the mean and standard deviation. So one of the aspect we looked at, the dimension where they were facing a lot of mental health issues, was the cognitive and physiological regulation. And I would like to share one example. Is as simple as knowing and understanding that you all are sitting here today, decided what to wear for the presentation or what to wear for the day, right? We had that choice to understand. But many times when we look at children and young adult, and it is coming out of love as well, the caregiver does, that, we might look out. So they might not get to understand what I would want to wear. So many aspects also came around that how to make a decision. Decision making was one of the aspects that the child who is not able to take the decision faces many mental health issues, because the child is not able to make those small decisions like choosing a color which I want to wear, or I want to wear a shirt, or I want to wear a t-shirt if I'm not able to see the color. Just understanding those small decisions that you make and what you become, it's very important, isn't it? So that was one of the major aspects we also see. Not able to make the decision on your own hampers the mental health, hampers the decision making, the confidence that we build onto. So very important, very basic, understanding that, I want to wear something that I like, or giving me an option what I want to wear. Even if I don't know, I might pick out of 2 or 3. So understanding that becomes very important. That was one of the issues we were able to identify. Now coming on to what we did when we did the identification and screening. So this project came 2 years back in our life when we were trying to understand the effects the COVID also bring onto it. So as I mentioned in the starting of my presentation, mental health always existed. It's a broader term. Mental health issues were always existed. It might have been there under the carpet, but COVID was the one which we were able to see when people were going through many issues. So for a person with deaf blindness who has a mode of communication which is tactile, imagine during COVID and understanding that you cannot touch, you cannot communicate. And there was one of the example I would like to share. There was a young adult from Mumbai. He was a cheered person who has a mode of communication with the tactile form. He used to communicate, he was so happy. COVID happened. He learned somehow that if you touch the other person, you might die. Because of the touching, the disease is spreading. So he stopped touching people, he stopped communicating. The only mode of communication was tactile, and he stopped communicating to people. He locked himself in the room because he thought if he touches someone to even communicate, he might get COVID. So his social life hampered. He was emotionally feeling lonely. He had many issues which came out as a behavioral aspect. He was stopped keeping his hygiene, he stopped maintaining his hygiene, which became visible to the special educator and parent, and they did not know what to do. That was just one of the many examples that I wanted to share. So now talking about what we did when we identified those issues and looking at those dimensions. When we also look at the intervention, it was very hard to do what to do and how to do it, because everybody needs an individual-based intervention. Mode of communication is different, interaction is different, working is different, right? For some people, it might not work. For some people, it might. So we wanted to adapt. What we did, we took a help from our special educator, trained professionals, to understand how it can be adapted. What I and my team, the organization did, was to come up and understand how it can implement. So I want to share, in the slide, you will see there were 2 activities which we come up to actually focus on the mental health-based intervention. One of the activity was based on narrative practice. So when we look at, it was named My World. Everybody has their own world. And understand their world, we wanted to implement and talk about how do they see the world. It could be really different, and understand what all encompass in their world. It was as simple, one example I wanted to share, and I'm sorry, am I taking too much time?
You have 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes. Thank you.
You have 10 more minutes, so if there's questions you want.
Right. I'm so sorry. When I start talking about my work, I just don't shut up. I try to summarize it. So when we look at the intervention, then we focuses on those issues which came out as a theme when we identified. So looking at one of the prominent was loneliness, not having self-awareness. So working on the self-awareness was one of the aspects. Building on the confidence was one of the aspects from the activities. So we come up with 2 activities, and then there are many more came up. So when we worked and started working, my world was to understand how they look at the world so that we understand their aspect, their perspective onto the world, Like, who do they identify as friend? Who do they identify as their support person? How do they understand the daily aspect of their living? So this is how we wanted to build their understanding on the world, and then relating it, which can bridge the gap where we can work upon. Second was relaxation breathing exercise. It's not yoga. So a lot of time when we talk about relaxation breathing exercise, people come up, oh, we do yoga, we know breathing. So this was talking about a specific aspect where we are doing consciously breathing and understanding it, where we can relate to the aspect. For example, somebody go through the behavioral issue, we make them understand the breathing aspect, taking in and taking out consciously 3 or 4 times, and then relating it with the aspect where they have those issues. For example, somebody facing anxiety, you just cannot tell them to stop. You just can't stop doing the anxiety. Oh, it just happens. We cannot do that, right? So understanding it, and it also took time. Realizing it, that breathing out, it's easier to teach, but breathing in is difficult to teach. Am I making sense? So yeah, that was one of the aspects. First, to actually make them learn how to do the breathing exercise, and then relating it with the mental health issues and aspect which we were able to identify. So these two were the exercise which focused on the mental health intervention, and there was a course of action. There was monitoring, tracking what worked with them, what does not work with them, and how we could proceed. For example, one example that I would share was like how to teach the breathe out. So for example, somebody who can do with the bubble breathing, making the bubbles out, that was one of the aspects. Or somebody who's we can make with it, like there were balls, thermocol balls, and then you do that just to make them teach. That was one of the great ideas a special educator came up with. So that was one of the aspects, that how did we adapt the intervention. She's looking, I'm just moving forward a little faster. A success case story that I wanted to share with you all. So in India, there's a small town called Nagpur. There's a small picture as well, which is there. The name has been changed. So for the confidentiality, there was a female child who has deaf blindness and cerebral palsy, faces daily epilepsy as well. So we got to know when we were doing the identification, there is an aspect where have you given the child a medication which is not prescribed. So the child was taking the prescription, the child was taking the medication without prescription. And the caregiver didn't know how it was affecting, not affecting, was it doing good or was it doing more bad to the child. So when we did the identification with a lot more counseling and taking sessions, we were able to consult the parent to go and consult a neurologist and psychiatrist for the prescription and the medication, what should work and how it should work, and then coming up with the individual-based, tailor-based intervention so that it could help us understand more about the child's status. And now, I would like to say when I visited recently, she was a lot more happier. Then the parent was talking about it, that, the child was often crying, and I could not understand why the child was crying. Is it because of epilepsy? Is it because of food? Or is it because of just feeling pain, which I don't know, which part of the body? And when we did the consultation, when we did the psychiatric intervention as well, we were able to identify, the neurologists were able to identify that because of over-medication as well are causing a lot of side effects. So that was one of the cases that I wanted to share out of many. And one of the conclusions that I want to say that in the conclusion, it's just a start. We know that I come from a developing country, and I wanted to share that when we look at mental health, people a lot more time associated it with mental illness. And one of the major aspects that we hold from the project is creating awareness to understand that mental health is so much more than just mental illness. There's mental well-being. There is something that we all could work upon. It's not always that we have to look at when we face the issue, then only we have to work on mental health. It's always a room and space, scope to work on the mental health. To understand that, there's so much need that came around from this project. So our stakeholders were children and young adult. We want to expand the age brand as well. Like the people who are above 24 also faces mental health issues. People who are below 10 years also faces mental health issues. And also, from this project, we could able to understand caregivers also need the special attention to talk about mental health and mental health issues. Special educators who directly work with them also require to work upon their mental health. So those were the few key areas which we also identified from this project to work further upon it. Just to stop myself, there were a lot of limitations which I've already mentioned in the presentation. Lack of research, dearth of data, and yeah, I will stop myself. She stands up. Yes.
There's probably lots of questions in the room. So amazing. Does anyone have any questions? Alan, I'm gonna come over.
I do have a thank you slide.
Hello, hello. Thanks, Priya. Great. Am I on here? Yeah. Oh, great presentation. I just had two quick questions, and I'm aware that we have like 4 minutes, but I just wanted to know, sort of the etiology behind the age group. What made you start at 10 years old? How did that reasoning come about? And secondly, I just wanted to touch base on the point you made about the sibling piece. Was there, or did the data support any sort of mental health increase between those who had siblings, where you used the example, I can't do what my siblings do, or those that didn't have siblings that maybe had increased isolation because they didn't have that social network built into the family? Did the data support or more prevalent mental health issues in one group or the other?
You can talk in that microphone there.
I think my voice was, but yeah, anyway, use the mic. To answer your first question, I wanted to say that, as I said in the start, the project was funded by Grand Challenges Canada. So it came from there, the age group that we have to pick on and worked upon from 10 to 24 years. That is how we are bounded and limited by that age group. Second, when you talk about the prevalence part, about having a sibling and not having a sibling, from the quantitative data, we come around with the numbers. And probably from the question that were there around, that talking about the neglect and how do they feel about having a social group and who they consider as a friend, support person when they have the sibling, and when you say not having a sibling. So there's a lot more scope to understand that through qualitative data, because quantitative data only help us to understand the part of yes or no. So when I shared the example, that was the part where I was doing the field visit. And I get to know the aspect that one of the person who has the sibling, and coming around both ways is, the sibling also needed that understanding that, there's a lot more attention goes to the person who has a deafblindness than me. And there's the other aspect where the person sees that I am not able to do what my brother or sister is able to do. Whereas, as you very rightly mentioned, somebody who does not have a sibling feel a lot more aspect that I do not have anyone to talk to. So these are the aspects which we come across from the qualitative aspect. So far it's a start, and we also got a point where to work upon for further aspect in the coming years. I hope I answered. Yeah. Thank you.
Is there any other questions? I think we can maybe take one more. Anybody? Sure.
Hello, thank you for a great presentation. I'm Tora from Norway. I have a question according to the prevalence between acquired and congenital deafblindness, because I was surprised to see that the congenital group was so big. And you said something about it being hard if you want to accept the new state. So my question is actually just, who is included in the congenital group?
So when we are talking about congenital group, we are talking about people who have deafblindness by birth. And when we are talking about the acquired, that the child or the young adult did not have deafblindness by birth, and with the age or because of a fever or because of the other aspect, the environmental aspect, they acquired the deafblindness. So that's how we, so when we looked at the enroll aspect, we look at if somebody has a deafblindness by birth or it has come across with the age or with the environmental aspect. So that's how we took upon the...
Just a quick follow-up.
Yes, yes.
So would Usher-Son syndrome and Stickler be acquired?
So when we talk about the syndromes, so again, understanding it, how early it was identified. For example, if it is identified with the age of 1, 2, or 3, then you understand that it is coming out as a congenital. And when you're saying that it is identified at 12, 13, so you know it is coming around with the acquired. So am I? Yeah. I would just want to say one last statement. So,
No worries.
So I know if anyone has any questions or any sort of query, we know we are here for 4 days. So please feel free to reach out because I'm going to do that the same. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Priya. Thank you. Thank you, Priya, so much for sharing your knowledge with us today and the results of your mental health checklist. And I'm sure a lot of what you talked about today, especially around COVID, for those of us that support people who are deafblind, resonated very deep, very well. So as a small token of our appreciation for you coming here today and sharing your information with us. Sorry. Very well.